I'm welcome to present a Brexit Studies YouTube channel. Today we're joined by our senior fellow, Dr. Stephen McCabe. So Steve, last week the fourth round of talks on the future relationship between the EU and the UK ended with both sides agreeing that little progress has been made. What are the key issues that both sides are disagreeing on?
Well, strange enough, fish, which for those who may not be aware is a magnificent 0.12% of the economy, so a tenth of 1%. And when I last look, employs something like 12,000 people, and something like a quarter of those are sort of part-time. So this is a very, very sort of small proportion of the economy, but it's kind of one of these incendiary issues that drives the sort of the English fishermen mad. And that seems to be sort of the one that's dominating everything, but it's also about competition rules, governance, and another one which of course is much more important, which of course is police cooperation. And of course what we've got to realise is that in the sort of the 43 years, is it, that since we sort of all been members of the EU, everything we've done has been sort of inextricably linked to what goes on in the EU. And the hope is of course that sort of by getting the trade deal, and of course what the negotiations are about is trying to get the best possible deal from the UK's point of view, but of course the EU are trying to maintain their sacred principles, and what they are really worried about is creating or allowing the creation of a state which gets all the sort of the benefits of being part of the EU, but effectively as a sovereign nation can effectively do what it likes, so it can undercut markets and be in direct competition. So it's all difficult. But I have to say that there's a lot of pessimism, but the sort of the view is that this is kind of standard operation for the sort of the everything tends to go down not just to sort of the 11th hour or the last minute, but the last couple of seconds. So I think there's a degree of brinkmanship which is often sort of the way with these things. But you know, what's interesting, as I say, that to come back to fish, that really significant industry, which is apparently we have, or the British cheese making industry is just as important in terms of GDP as fish. But of course, we don't get the fish makers protesting quite as loudly as the British fishermen or women, for that matter.
So the UK has until the end of June to ask for the transition period to be extended into next year. But Boris Johnson, as we know, has ruled this out. But do you think an extension is completely off the table, or could it happen right at the last minute?
Well, like everything, I mean, Johnson has said that this will not happen, and even though many people claim that whatever Johnson says, think 180 degrees different, and you might get the answer. I suspect on this one that there probably will not be an extension. Certainly, the idea that he will seek an extension at the end of this month, i.e. in the next couple of weeks, I think that's not going to happen because of all the statements. And of course, quite clearly, going back to the previous answer, what's going on at the moment is that both sides, because you've got the sort of the block of the 27 other EU members, or those that remain part of the EU, they have their own constituencies and their own governments to answer to, as does the sort of the British government. And of course, they promised they were going to sort of get Brexit done, and so playing brinkmanship and they playing it hard, or hard ball, as the expression goes. It's good for political purposes. Does that mean to say it won't happen? Well, of course not. Anything can happen. We found that last year. I suspect, for what it's worth, that what we're going to get is some sort of bare bones deal, enough to sort of to keep everyone, I wouldn't call it happy, but pacified. And of course, remember, even if there was no deal, and that is a sort of a nightmare scenario, it's not forever. Okay, leaving the EU, that was a kind of once in a generation thing, and of course, who knows, maybe in another 20, 30, 40 years, who knows, we could rejoin. But of course, just because you end up with no deal, then there will be deals done, albeit in sector by sector. So what I think both sides will be looking for is enough to sort of to keep the sort of the wheels in motion. Just as a matter of interest, I was reading something on the Financial Times an hour or so ago, and they were talking about the fact that on a busy day, 10,000 trucks come through Dover. If we don't get a deal, we'll be back to sort of the nightmare scenario of sort of trucks stacking up. And as another article I read over the weekend was saying, well, we just about got away with not having food shortages during the COVID crisis. we may not get away with it next time round, because of course we can expect no favours from the EU at that point. So yeah, a lot rests on sanity and wisdom prevailing.
So Cabinet Minister Matt Hancock has said that a trade deal with the EU based on the UK's very reasonable demands is still possible. But what are the reasonable demands, and how likely do you think a trade deal is right now?
Well, I mean, I've kind of said already that what the EU, well, say what the UK wants and the EU are resisting is to have as much of the benefits as they possibly can, with none of the sort of the negative aspects. Now, okay, that's standard sort of negotiating policy. You go in high, and then you have to sort of reduce your demands. I mean, this is all we're all saying our demands are reasonable. I mean, some of them are, I don't doubt that, but some of them are unreasonable. You can't expect the sort of the EU to give everything away, because why would they? As I say, both sides will end up, will say, I would imagine, hope to end up with something that is workable and gives them enough wriggle room. And as I stressed in the previous answer, there will always be derivations to these in the future, and of course adaptations, and of course and who's to say in another 4 years' time, should there be a sort of a change in government and Keir Starmer comes along, then of course they can renegotiate the sort of the trade deal. So it'll be like that. I mean, quite clearly they will not be tied into sort of the overall negotiation of the EU, because that's gone with membership. But yeah, I think it's a bit disingenuous to say everything we're doing is reasonable, because quite clearly it's not reasonable from the EU's point of view. And the EU, that they want to impose rules in perpetuity. Well, of course, quite clearly the UK are not going to agree to that. In summary, I think what we're going to get is I don't think anything will be agreed by the end of this month. I think we'll get to this meeting between Johnson and the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, and that there will be some hard talking at that point. And then perhaps we'll get the sort of the bare bones. It'll possibly be a bit like the sort of when Johnson met Leo Varadkar in the Wirral last October. Something will magically appear. But I think at the moment what we're into is the sort of the Brinkman stage, or brinkmanship stage, of the sort of the negotiations.
Thanks for joining us, Steve.